All right. So I figure people are going to continue to be joining. I figure we can get started today. Again, just wanted to say welcome, everyone. Thanks for taking the time to join us today. We wanted to start the session today by just sharing a little bit about myself and sharing like a high level about this event as well. Before we dive in, just wanted to, for the ones that don't know me, my name is Pablo. I'm technically the co-founder of a tech recruiting startup called Slope, based in Seattle, Washington. We work with early stage teams between pre-seed to Series A on helping them hire their first 10 engineers. But I am technically a product designer by trade. I've been in the industry for 10 years plus. When I started my venture as a co-founder, I knew that it was going to be lonely as a designer. So I looked into different design communities in the Seattle area. This was right after COVID, so everything kind of died down, and I came across Friends of Figma, and I was really surprised that there was no chapter in Seattle. So I applied at the time. We've been running the community since. We're getting close to about 2,000 members now, and really passionate about creating spaces where designers, engineers, and other people in the field can connect and grow together. So really thrilled to be hosting the event today as part of Friends of Figma World Tour. To tell you a little more about this opportunity, this is a 24-hour nonstop virtual celebration of the Friends of Figma community around the world. A lot of this stems from config. A lot of us have been really energized and excited about being surrounded by other designers, and this event is built on true global collaboration. Like every participating Friends of Figma chapter will host their own 1 hour session. Seattle actually has two, so we're a little special today. But we'll be featuring local speakers, local insights, and community-led content. Our goal is really to celebrate the richness and diversity of our global community while making these sessions accessible to anyone, anywhere, and just remind everyone that we can do this together. And really excited to be sharing knowledge today. So for today's session, I wanted to introduce you to our speaker, Steve Won. One of my favorite things about running Friends of Figma is that you get to meet with incredible designers and engineers. In this case, Steve is both, has the mind of a designer, but an engineer by trade. He's ex-design lead at Coda and now founder of his own company. But I think he'll do better justice introducing himself than I could, but really excited to present you today, Steve, and please take us from here.
All right, thanks for that intro, Pablo. Let's see if this is working okay as we intended. All right. Great. Awesome. So hi, it's great to meet you all. My name is Steve. You can also call me Songjun. And previously, I was fortunate to be a part of a few different companies to help create products that millions of people use today, as well as getting to experiment with new ideas that may have been niche, but took very unique approaches, for the time. So Microsoft, if you're local here, Coda, Samsung, and Naver are some of the places that I've been at. Now I'm a designer, engineer, and a founder at B01, which is a software studio where we're creating interfaces for ideas, builders, and new types of human AI interactions. And though I've worn the designer title most of my career, as Pablo also mentioned, my background is actually from computer science. And this has allowed me or allowed programming to be a key part of my craft since the beginning of my design career. And it has shown me something very powerful, which is design thinking becomes incredibly potent when it's not limited by translation barriers. I was lucky to see how much more designers could accomplish when they could execute their own insights. And all of this has led me to form a point of view on today's topic. A point of view that maybe some folks find counterintuitive to some degree, that while many fear AI will replace designers, I do think it's actually making the design thinking more powerful by removing the translation layer between idea and execution. And that an effective design approach in this new world becomes less and less about wrestling with the details at a feature or visual level, but more and more about how do you turn a high level intent into a working reality. So we'll be talking a little bit more about that. And at the end, I'd love to exchange notes because I feel like this is a topic that we're all learning as we go since everything is changing so much so quickly. So from my experience, I found that most product failures aren't design or engineering failures. They're actually translation failures. And here's what I mean. Let's take a simple design request as an example to reveal all the systemic complexities that it creates. So a designer at a B2B SaaS company sees users struggling to give feedback on documents. Solution seems obvious, right? So let's have users comment in each doc. Let's allow that feature. So designer goes in, designs something that looks pretty straightforward, like a comment bubble, text input, submit button. Clean mockup, gets thumbs up, gets approved. Now, the design decision seems simple because it was framed as a UI problem. Where do we put the comment box and what should it look like? But the real decision was actually a system architecture choice. We're going to go create a multi-user, real-time, persistent communication layer that integrates with our doc system, user management, notifications, and permissions. Now, the designer made that massive systems decision without realizing it because they were thinking in screens instead of systems. Thus, appearingly simple UI addition actually began a cascade. Comments now need a user auth, so it requires a login system integration. It needs timestamps, which means the platform needs to be able to handle time zones across global users. Notifications, moderation requires admin tools, reporting system, content policies, making comments searchable, new types of database indexing, search infrastructure, and so forth. I think you get the point. So what started out as an original estimate of 2 weeks actually turned into a development of 8 weeks. Engineering team gets pulled from other priorities to make this happen. Launch delayed. You had to rebuild parts of the user system, perf issues, and customer complaints about confusing permissions. This is a great example of what I refer to as design cascade debt. It's the accumulated cost of design decisions made without understanding their systemic implications. And like the above example, it's when design decisions that seem like surface level UI choices are actually deep architectural decisions in disguise. The simple part is the illusion. And here's the thing. If you've been there, this isn't your fault as a designer. The real problem isn't that designers lack the systemic thinking or the technical skills to figure this out. Well, then what makes it difficult for all of us, especially when we're deep into the weeds of iterating through designs and deciding which path to take? Well, for one, the system is designed to hide complexity from you. So if you look at all the tools that we are very familiar and comfortable with, design tools show you pixels, not databases. Design education focuses more on user empathy and aesthetic, not system architecture. You're optimizing for a different, and in this context, the wrong feedback loop. Engineers see your work as decisions are locked in. Many user testing happens on prototypes, not real systems. And by the time that you see the technical implications, it's too late to redesign. And unfortunately, the handoff model creates artificial boundaries. It makes it easy for one to think, it's not my job to think about technical constraints. Stay in your lane culture exists between disciplines. Technical details are seen as implementation concerns, and design decisions and system decisions get treated as separate domains. Well, we know it, and actually want to highlight it because the partner should also care about this. Why? Well, it's that because design cascade debt, it ends up incurring more costs than what we know as technical debt, which I'm referring to here as more around engineering trade-offs and shortcuts taken to ship faster. It's like cutting corners in implementation for different trade-offs to make. And the reason why design cascade debt costs more is because earlier in the process, equals bigger impact. So technical debt affects how you build. Design cascade debt affects what you build. It's harder to fix. Technical debt can be refactored. Unfortunately, design cascade debt often requires a fundamental rethinking of the user experience and compounds across teams. One design decision with systemic implications creates work for multiple teams. So if this cascade debt is bleeding time and resources from every product team, what's the solution that's emerging? Well, let's start by, first talking about the shift that's already happening. I think we can all agree that with AI, the past year plus has been a very interesting time for all of us. It's really changing the playing field, lifting what used to be constraints and adding new considerations that many of us aren't used to yet. But one thing for certain is AI is becoming the universal translator between design intent and technical reality, right? And prompting is a major example of this, with so many tools that are coming out, taking these words and turning it into something much more. I think a couple of tools that we're all very familiar with: Cursor, v0.dev, Replit, and more, right? As well as LLMs and prior no-code tools also getting better. And this universal translator is changing how teams work entirely. When a designer can go from concept to a working prototype in half an hour instead of 3 weeks. When early stage companies with integrated designers are outpacing traditional teams, shipping features when competitors are still planning meetings. And once a few team members really get the vibe of bridging these different gaps, the entire team moves faster, even if you're not PD. And communication improves, iteration cycles shrink, and the whole product development process just becomes much more fluid because there is no translation loss between disciplines. We also see the shift in how other disciplines are expanding their capabilities. So it's now very common and very easy to see product managers using low-code tools or vibe coding tools to build working prototypes or working dashboards, and being able to turn requirements directly into functional software without getting design or engineering involved. Backend engineers might use v0.dev or Cursor to build polished front ends faster than waiting for the design handoff. And non-technical founders, so many founders around me, they're building MVPs of their SaaS product ideas using AI tools, delivering without hiring any developers. So all teams across the board. But here's what I think it means for designers. I don't think it necessarily means every designer needs to get better at coding or whatnot. I think it's actually a call for designers who are great logic architects, I think, which is much more attainable and aligned with our natural design thinking. And more importantly, with AI handling a lot of the technical translation, it becomes all about the thinking behind the idea. And someone with the ability to paint the big picture for how the experience should guide the user becomes even more impactful and valuable. Sounds like a lot of what designers do already and are doing today. The thing is, to ride this wave of change, we've learned that the better you get at specifying what you want, the more you can actually create what you ultimately envision for your users. However, most designers are, I'll be honest, terrible at specification or writing specs. So I call it the specification paradox. And there's a couple reasons why designers are bad at this. One is, I think we're trained to optimize for inspiration, not instruction. So things like make something feel premium works for stakeholder buy-in, but it gives engineers or machines nothing actionable. Visual thinking versus systematic thinking. We think in flows and feelings more, where engineers need logic trees and edge cases. I gotta say, I definitely do. There's a fear over constraining creativity. So in a way, vague specs feel more designery than detailed requirements. And there's just a natural training gap. Design education focuses on aesthetics and user empathy, less on technical communication. So how do you get better at this so that you can get better at creating what you envision? Well, designers already think systematically when we design user flows and consider edge cases. But here's what's changing today, these days. AI is turning that systematic thinking that we're already doing into direct execution power. And to leverage it, we're learning that we need to sharpen how we think in a way more like a compiler. If you know what a compiler is, it doesn't just understand code. Its role is to translate human intent into precise machine instructions. And that's exactly what a designer role is also becoming, translating high-level user needs into systems that actually work. And here are 3 shifts to think more like a compiler and to get better at creating what you envision. So one is thinking in data flows, not screens. Every interface is just the visible tip of a data iceberg. So when you design a simple user page, you're really designing how data moves, transforms, and connects throughout the entire system. And here's what changes when you start thinking this way. So instead of asking, where should this button go? You ask, what happens to data when someone clicks this? Instead of designing isolated screens, you begin tracing the journey, asking questions like the below. So if we were to take an example, let's take designing a save for later heart icon or a bookmarking icon, right? It's actually fairly simple when you approach it from a traditional angle. But when you start thinking about it more from a system angle and how data flows, you start realizing that you got to create a new relationship in the database. It requires new user accounts. You need to do cross-device sync. How are you going to handle different page load times? And it also opens up new possibilities for collections, sharing, and recommendations. While the heart icon looks the same, the understanding of the data flow leads you to design a completely different context and its feature set. So something that we began doing a lot more of and have found very helpful is, of course, we always start with the screen flow or have that be a critical part of it. And this is what the user sees and clicks. And it's also something that we feel very natural and comfortable with. But in addition, we also started drawing a data flow, right? What information moves where, gets stored how, and connects to what. And this is one of those areas where we found that AI is really great at helping you map it out if you're less familiar with it. So here's like an example prompt that we actually use to customize and set up for a good baseline. And many designers stop at the screen flow, and we're finding that the data flow is where you prevent the design cascade debt and unlock better solutions. And all of this, we're learning that it matters because what users are interacting with aren't actually your interface. They're interacting with your data through your interface. And when you understand the data, you design experiences that feel just effortless instead of fighting against the grain or the technical reality. So the second shift is designing the intelligence before the interface. So every product, I think, is a conversation between what users want to accomplish and what the system can actually deliver. And most design failures happen because we design the human side without understanding the machine side. So users say, I want to search for something, but what they really mean is, I want to find the thing I'm thinking of, even if I can't describe it perfectly. But what the system here is let's match those exact keywords to database fields, right? And really the shift is, instead of just designing what the interface looks like, what's going to be that intelligence that's going to make it work like the engine? So if you were tasked to go create a search box, right? The traditional approach would be, let's go wireframe the scenarios and design the UI, right? But thinking about it from the systems angle, you got to understand what perfect search requires, right? Which includes handling typos, synonyms, partial matches, context, graceful failures. You also have to design the logic first. How do you handle autocomplete? How are going to be smart suggestions that come about? Did you mean prompt and so forth? And after all of that, designing an interface that expresses that intelligently. So many times, this is where we start. But maybe a more practical framework is, you start from mapping what users are actually trying to achieve. So not just what they say they want, but really being thorough, vetting, and figuring out what they want to achieve. And this is also another great touch point to use generative AI to take the core scenarios in your mind and expanding them to include edge cases and any cases that you have missed. And I think this is one of those very practical, very effective ways to build a more shared understanding with your partners, such as product or engineering, to do it even when you're designing many things. And then afterwards, understanding what technology can reliably deliver. Again, also here, thanks to AI, you don't need to know all the technology out there, but you also no longer need to go bug your engineering partner for every single feasibility check. AI makes it very easy to do a quick gut check on whether something is possible or not within the boundaries of the scenarios that you're envisioning. And then afterwards, design the logic. And designing logic is, I think, from what we've learned, all about bridging the gap between user intent and the technical capability that you've identified in the first two steps, and really connecting those two in the most natural behavior. And lastly, once all of that is done, then let's go design the interface that makes this logic feel as effortless as possible. Well, this matters because I think the most intuitive interfaces are built on very sophisticated logic. And when you design the intelligence first, the interface become a natural expression of that intelligence rather than a pretty facade over clunky functionality. Take a look at Google search box. It looks so simple, but it's actually expressing decades of intelligence about language, intent, and context. And I think simplicity comes from sophisticated logic and not from ignoring complexity. And third and the last shift is just getting very good at specifying with precision. And a lot of how we've talked about it internally at our studio is it's how do we go from design language to machine language in some way. English or natural language is really becoming our new programming language. I think not just for engineers or designers who know how to code, but anyone who's making, I'd say. And I think it brings a new meaning to WYSIWYG. What you say is what you get. But I think most designers speak design language, which is optimized for human interpretation, but less so machine execution. And in some of the early experience that we've gone through, imprecise specification ended up leading to endless revision cycles, leading to more time, more iterations, and compromised quality. So I think what we've learned is that a lot of this, going from design language and going to machine language is really crystallizing what you know in your intuition, your gut, in your experience, and articulating it in a way another entity can fully comprehend, and really wrapping a structure around those feelings that we have as while we're designing and exploring. So a couple examples, rather than saying make something feel trustworthy, getting very precise. Display a security badge above the fold, use SSL indicators in the URL bar, show customer testimonials with photo and company name, adding a progress indicator for a multi-step process. And there's a couple of different examples you can already think of pretty easily. And while AI and AI tools can do so much, we're also learning that they can be incredibly literal. And the more precisely you can articulate what you want, the closer the first iteration gets you to your actual vision. So here's a couple rule of thumb that now we're embracing in our day-to-day work whenever we're working with AI to accelerate our design or making process. First, before we hand off any design or any instruction, we ask ourselves, could someone build exactly what I'm envisioning based on what I've communicated? If not, we get more specific. Writing specs like you're teaching and not commanding. AI learns from every word you use. So instead of make the button prominent, we end up explaining why it should be prominent. So as an example, this is the primary action users came here to complete. So it needs to be visually distinct from the secondary options and impossible to miss. And context teaches AI to make better decisions about everything else in that situation, as well as over time. And then obviously specify the goals, but also the constraints. And this actually ends up being a little bit more interesting because it leaves room for some creativity while following high-level directions. So don't just say what you want, tell what you definitely don't want. So build a sign-up form, but never ask for information that's not immediately needed. Never use dark patterns. Never make password requirements a surprise, such as that. And we've been kind of testing this a lot with different scenarios, whether that be when we're engineering a feature or when we are trying to generate a media asset to go along with a message that we want to convey. And in regardless of the medium, I feel a little funny saying this. We're learning that better you get at talking to AI, the more human your product or the outcome that we're trying to create becomes. And I think that comes from precision in speccing, just leads to more intuitive user experiences, just due to that there's less gap or no gap between intent and execution. So, yeah. So those three shifts, we're learning that really help us extend where we come from as designers and allow us to do something more powerful. And in addition, we're learning that it also aligns us better towards how other disciplines or partners actually think and approach problems. And when you understand both sides or multiple sides, you unlock possibilities that only exist at that intersection. So there's many great case studies of products whose great experiences only exist at that intersection. So if you take Stripe's payment UX, require deep understanding of financial regulations, fraud detection, and international banking to design an interface that just works. Or Figma's real-time collaboration on the web when it first came out. I feel like the interface design was inseparable from the underlying CRDT architecture or the architecture that was used to engineer it. And you couldn't design one without understanding the other. And linearization tracking, the speed and the fluidity of the interface only works because they designed the database schema and UIs as one integrated system. I've also lived it in my own projects. So at Microsoft, I started a grassroots project that became something called Hub Keyboard. It was a keyboard that brought Microsoft services directly to users' keyboard across all apps. And I think we were only able to discover the opportunity here and get to this because of the understanding that we had about how keyboards are a framework that sits above every other app. And it had very unique set of constraints as well as capabilities, different set of system level permissions, different input methods, different memory constraints compared to traditional app development. But they were the ones that really unlocked unique values for our users and for us to try injecting different intelligence throughout the entire operating system. And in my current role, I get to experiment and build different interfaces and human AI interactions at our studio B01. And while our focus and work is all about creating experiences in the product and for users, The most interesting work actually requires treating technical components just like design material. So understanding APIs and LLM capabilities the same way we understand buttons and layout systems. And that's opened up like an entirely new building block for when we're designing. And here's an experimental tool that we recently shared where you collaborate with AI to brainstorm and validate product ideas. It's something called Flyway. And the key thing here was this project was led by a designer who designed both the interface as well as the chain of LLM calls that power it. And after the initial interface was set, a lot of the designing work was around what combination of models and intelligence do you bring together to reason the best output? And how do you combine it and chain it in a very different way to experiment and interpret what's valuable versus not? And I think that was only possible because of the understanding across both sides. And I'll say that was a pretty exciting type of work that we wouldn't have been able to do otherwise. So I think these are just some examples of how integrated knowledge and these shifts naturally pushes your role to go from an interface designer to a broader product architect. So I'd say, welcome to the compiler generation. I think designers who can translate high-level intent into working reality will thrive even more in the coming years and coming months. And really, I think it's not about designers becoming a developer. I don't think it's that. I think it's really about design thinking maturing and us having more building blocks to turn our thinking more systemized, more structured, and more logical to execute on it. And I think shifting the approach to getting sharper at expressing our intent as part of our design process really is a key to that. And with AI abstracting details of the stack, I think systematic thinking and this clarity and expression becomes our superpower. So yeah, that was what I had prepped for today, and thank you.
Amazing. Thanks, Steve. This was like so insightful. Really appreciate everything you walk us through. I think this was very eye-opening for me, and I think a lot of people in the audience. I figure we could spend the next few minutes just answering questions. There's a few questions that people asked on the chat. So I'll start the Q&A so you all can start dropping questions there. But a few that I've heard so far, one from Young, has the data flow changed in the AI era? For example, with LLMs, the data output can sometimes be quite unpredictable. You don't always know what you're going to get. I'm curious how this impacts traditional data pipelines or system design.
Yeah, that's a really great question. And I can just speak to the experiments and the products that we've been building. I think it's had two most impactful impact for us. One is as we're thinking through again how the data flows in our experience that we're imagining. Since not all of us come from the same proficiency in that, AI has just been a really great thinking partner to map everything out. And in a lot of cases, we would get to maybe 70-80% of the scenarios to design, and then AI helps uncover the other 20-30%. But I think the more interesting part is, and I think this is very tricky because you got to be able to bring value to it. But I think before we had, in a way, less appetite to think about capturing data and trying to make use of that, right? Of course, in a very high intent, a very intentional scenarios, we're always very keen on that. But now that there is this kind of super API through AI to digest, various types of data at once, as well as data that's not even structured that well. A lot of that's much more accessible now. I think that's actually kind of been prompting us to think more and more around what's user's end goal and what type of data do we need to collect and gather with consent, of course, to to get user from point A to point B in the most magical path possible. So it's actually adding more data pipelines for us in most cases. But yeah, I think I may have indirectly answered it, but I think that's how it's been impacting a lot of our work.
Makes sense. Thanks for sharing that, Steve. Another question from Clara here. How can a designer represent systems thinking in a resume or portfolio, or celebrate the wins they've accomplished with systems thinking?
That's a really great question. I think obviously if you worked on a horizontal experience feature or problem, whether it be through your project or your company, I think that's a great use case. But in case you don't, I think one suggestion that I heard at one point and also love relaying is try building your own app, even if it's very micro or small. Because I think when you're building something and thinking through the entire stack, it forces you to think about everything as a system, even a string copy, right? And I think a lot of the different works that I've seen also as a fellow designer, that's also been one of the clearest cases to see how a person thinks through different systems and what types of system versus vertical decision do you make in different parts of the product for different trade-offs. So yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. There's another question from Young. Mentioned, I'm curious about your thoughts on chat UX. These days, almost every app seems to have a chat style interface, but I'm not sure that's always the best solution. I think designers need to explore what truly makes a great user experience in the AI era. Any thoughts there, Steve?
Yeah, I think that's a great prompt too, and I agree. I think I saw an image that somebody shared of like top 5-6 most well-known AI interfaces, and they all start the same. So it's pretty funny. So I think we're at a state where AI is becoming more capable, right, to execute on things, but it doesn't yet know your full intent as well as the full context. I think there's a lot of interesting work happening around engineering that context more and more. I think people are calling it context engineering now more and more, but it doesn't know your intent yet. And the most direct way to get your intent, I guess, is manually having you express it. But I think chat interface works today because I actually see text and chat as maybe the most basic form of generative UX. I think there's a couple of companies that are exploring that area as well now. But text, in a way, is the most generative form of a user experience. So I think it's working now. But if you, I don't know, maybe in half a year or maybe 2 years, I don't think it's unrealistic for you to open an app, and if there's a shared agent or AI that kind of helps you look across all the different apps that you're using, it's probably going to know what you're likely going to do. And I think that's when things become a little bit more interesting, because these apps and these AI interfaces now become generative, much more beyond text. It can bring in different artifacts, richer controls, because now it has a higher confidence of what you're looking to do and what you want to go accomplish. Whereas I think right now that might come across a little bit obnoxious or noisy, just knowing where the capabilities are. So that's my 2 cents.
Makes sense. Appreciate you sharing that, Steve. Just wanted to see if anyone else had any other questions before we move on with the next part of today. Yeah, Clara asks, what are some tools you'd recommend?
Can you specify a little bit more for what use case? While Clara's perhaps sharing, I can share. This is uh, well, we've tried a lot of different APIs and tools because we also build a lot of internal tools at our studio for our own workflows because they're so niche but very like high leverage for us. And having tried, all the different ones out there, I think the one that we're narrowing in on the most at the moment is Claude. And I think the reason why is because it's just very easy to inject in both our engineering workflow as well as the chat interface that we use for the rest of the work, like more operational things. So it's like shared thread, shared fabric across all of them. But I mean, I think I don't know. I think my thesis is there might be differences on how well these models operate now, but at one point, I think they're going to become so similar in terms of its capability and intelligence that a lot of it is going to come down to the tone and manner of the model, right? I think someone in our team, our studio, mentioned it kind of feels like working with ChatGPT versus working with Claude. Feels like they're both capable, but it's working with coworkers of different personality, just because of the tone and manner, right? And I think it's going to become more and more like that, unless you end up working with a model that's like hyper specific, like a medical model, or not. So yeah, I think any of that would work really. But we've been gravitating a lot towards Claude only because it's so well integrated with all the workflows that we're having right now.
Yeah, that makes sense. Clara was highlighting the fact of how a lot of these tools aren't allowed in, enterprise settings, which obviously can be a barrier for people who work at larger orgs.
Yeah, that's really interesting. I actually heard that too. I wouldn't mention which company, but I met a bunch of folks who work at a large company, and they couldn't use AI LLM model because of security reasons, and yeah, in the beginning they couldn't tell, but now they really feel like they're falling behind in terms of their productivity compared to, in a way, competitors or others who are working with such models. So yeah, that's a bummer for sure.
Yeah. We have a couple more questions, and then we'll start wrapping up. One question from Ravina. As a designer, since we focus mostly on the happy path for MVPs, while engineers think a lot in end cases, I'd love to hear more about how you balance speed and execution.
Great question. And I think this is one of those things that's really great to use AI for. I know our chat today wasn't solely about how to design with AI, but this is one of those areas where AI has been really great in helping us. Because I agree. I think just because happy path and all the edge cases, they all matter, but I think it always comes down to a matter of priority, right? And I think in the past, how do you balance speed and execution? I think that really relied heavily on either the designer's intuition and figuring this out, or if you're working with a product manager, really relying on the PM. But how we've been doing a lot of this now is because we operate as a very small but tightly knit studio. Is we actually list out all the scenarios. We ask the LLM model, often Claude, to just expand it a little bit more, just to make sure that we're not missing anything. And then we ask two things. What are kind of the either dependencies or like the kind of the one-way doors that we need to decide on, like out of these paths, right? Which path do we need to design first to have trickling effect over the other ones? And then we also ask it to kind of weigh in and help us figure out which of these are really edge cases versus the path that are going to get exposed the most or give us the most impact in the current stage of the product. So we actually, a lot of these analytical and synthesis task, we actually loop in our AI internal tool a lot to figure that out. And I think of course, it's not always accurate, but more often than not, I think it does a really good job helping us gravitate towards the right direction and figuring out the priority.
Right on. Thanks, Steve. One last question from James. How do you balance the communication of discoverability of a product, of a product's intent constraints? A natural language restaurant finder may allow someone to search for a specific type of cuisine, but maybe not a specific type of dish. It's been challenging for me to balance encouraging the expression of intent while also placing constraints in his own experiments.
Someone search for. Yeah. And tell me, I'd love to hear, James, if I'm misunderstanding at all. But I think from that question, it sounds a little bit maybe less around expressing intent, but more around what does the backend or the intelligence have access to in terms of either index database or different pool of information to run that intent on. Not tell me if I might be misunderstanding, so I'd love to hear if I am.
Maybe while James clarifies, this may be a quick one, but Angelique was asking if you have any recommendations for prompt engineering in this framework.
Could you specify which framework? Are you talking about the entire what we were chatting about today, or are you asking about what James was mentioning above?
James, Angelique, if you guys are open, we can also bring you up to the stage to ask live. Maybe that could be easier.
Oh, yeah, that could be cool.
Just let me know in the chat if you're open to speak live. Don't want to put you in the spot.
Yeah, I think Angelique shared. Yep. So yes, for the data flow one, we actually showed a little bit of that. But yeah, if you want to connect afterwards, happy to share some of the baseline prompts that we use to just kind of run through our workflow. There's one that we been refining and kind of come back to as a baseline and end up using that to elaborate on some of the early tasks.
I'll let James clarify his question live.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Hey, yeah, great talk. Appreciate you coming on. I guess my question is more from a user's perspective. Say you're introducing a feature like natural language search in something. When you have a feature like, I consider natural language in general a feature that is so expressive and expansive. It's been tough for me to sort of communicate the constraints that a user could express that natural language in, but also sort of if they sort of express something that maybe the feature doesn't fully intend to bring back right now, how you can show an error state or something like that. It's sort of hard for me to both show like the happy path, but also sort of something like this, sort of like how to get you back on the right happy path, if this makes sense.
Yeah, I think it does. And curious to hear your take too, Pablo. But I think for that, I think one, this is not directly AI related, but when I was part of designing other input fields for other products, and whenever a user typed in something like a request that didn't exist yet. So as an example, into search box, if we're looking for a feature, if they were looking for a function or an integration that didn't exist, the happy path that we gave at the time was, we can't false promise anything, but we would give like an escape hatch where it's like, oh, like this doesn't exist yet, but if this is something that you really find valuable in how you use the app, click on this button and that'll be kind of sent as like a product feature request for us. And optionally, there's a way for the user to elaborate a little bit more on what they're looking for it to do. To be frank, for the AI use case, I haven't personally run into the case you're mentioning exactly yet. But maybe we will. And I don't know, I kind of want to follow up with you and learn from your experience and what's, not been working well or working well for you, James.
Yeah, sure. I'd love to follow up afterwards.
Sounds good. Really appreciate everyone asking questions. We do need to wrap up soon. So, one of the things that we wanted to do today is select a lucky winner who will be getting a $50 gift card for the Friends of Figma shop. Really appreciate everyone that's joined. So, Steve, I'll put you in the spot. And who gave the best question? And this person will be our winner.
I think all the questions were really good because I think it either helped us share a little bit more about our exact workflow, and like the one that James asked, I didn't have an answer to that either. But maybe I'll just go by who asked more questions because I think they were all good. I think Young may have asked more questions than others, so maybe Young deserves the gift card.
Sounds good. Well, Jan, congrats. If you can email me, I'll drop in my email in the chat bot, and I'll share the details of the of your prize. But congrats. With that said, I wanted to invite everyone to just come next to the next conversation that's happening right after this. This will be a presentation by Anima's CEO, Avishai Cohen. And I think it will be a good segue from this conversation because he'll be talking about vibe coding. This is hosted by the Friends of Figma San Francisco chapter. So if you're interested, you can scan the QR on the screen and register right away to join. Or you can also visit the Friends of Figma World Tour website. We have many other sessions lined up in the next few hours, so feel free to jump into the ones that spark interest. You can also catch them later because all sessions are going to be being recorded and will be available in the official YouTube channel in the next couple of days. We'll also share the links on our website and social media, so you can rewatch your favorite parts and catch up on anything that you might have missed. The other thing, if you have, any feedback, this event's been made by the community for the community, so your voice really matters, and would be really helpful if you can share what you thought about this experience and just help us improve moving forward. So if you can, this is a different QR code, but if you can scan it, would really appreciate your feedback here. And, last thing I wanted to say, this event wouldn't have been possible if a lot of people wouldn't have come together. So just wanted to highlight that this was an incredible show of like different chapters on the Friends of Figma community, but also all the different speakers that volunteer with their time, sharing all their knowledge. This has been really a powerful reminder that, the best things don't happen in isolation. Real impact feels when people come together and share their knowledge to build and to continue building together. So just wanted to shout out everyone that's been involved here, from all the Friends of Figma chapters to our speakers today. Steve, really appreciate everything that you've shared. I thought this conversation was fantastic. I learned a lot, and it sounds like the audience learned a lot. So just wanted to express gratitude for your time today and all the knowledge you shared. And hopefully we can make another one of this happen in the future. But with that said, if you all want to connect with Steve on the site, I'm sure he'll be happy to share more knowledge. But just wanted to say once again, thanks everyone for joining, and I hope you have a fantastic rest of your day.
Thanks, everyone. Thanks, Pablo.
All right. Thank you, everyone. Bye.